27,000 feet above the Gulf of Tonkin. The air is thin, cold, and clear. Sunlight glints off the canopy of a Vought F-8 Crusader, Buno 14546 call sign, Canasta 412. Inside the cockpit, Marine Corps First Lieutenant Mario Ski Pescarello holds his aircraft steady at 450 knots. He is part of a two-ship combat air patrol, a routine mission off the coast of North Vietnam. The world outside is a serene canvas of deep blue ocean and a hazy horizon. But inside the pressurized confines of the cockpit, a mechanical drama is about to unfold. A single red light on the instrument panel flickers, then illuminates with unforgiving certainty. It is the hydraulic pressure warning. A cascade of secondary failures will follow in a matter of seconds. For a pilot flying a single-engine, single-seat fighter, hydraulics are not just a system, they are life. They move the flight controls, the landing gear, the flaps, the very surfaces that allow a 20,000-pound machine to defy gravity. At this altitude, with this warning, the aircraft has just become one of the most complex gliders ever built. The nearest runway is the pitching deck of the USS Bonhomme Richard, miles away across the water. The pilot has approximately 90 seconds before all hydraulic fluid is gone. The journey home will be a fight not against an enemy, but against physics itself. The air war over North Vietnam is a relentless, high-stakes contest of technology, training, and attrition. Operation Rolling Thunder, the sustained bombing campaign against the North, has been underway for over 2 years. American air power is projected from sprawling bases in Thailand and from the decks of aircraft carriers operating at Yankee Station, a designated patrol area in the Gulf of Tonkin. The strategic objective is to interdict the flow of men and materiel south, to pressure Hanoi into a political settlement. But the tactical reality is a daily grind against a sophisticated and determined integrated air defense system. North Vietnam is protected by a dense network of radar-guided surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs, primarily the Soviet-made S-75 Divina, known to NATO as the SA-2 guideline. It is also defended by a dizzying number of anti-aircraft artillery, or AAA sites, ranging from heavy 100mm cannons to light 37mm guns, and countless small arms. And in the air, the threat comes from the nimble and dangerous MiG-17 and the supersonic MiG-21, flown by well-trained pilots of the Vietnam People's Air Force. The F-8 Crusader, the aircraft flown by Lieutenant Pescarello, is a unique and vital asset in this environment. It is the U.S. Navy's and Marine Corps' premier day fighter, a gunfighter in an age increasingly dominated by missiles. Known to its pilots as the last of the gunfighters, the F-8 is armed with 4 20mm Colt MAC-12 cannons, a rarity on modern jets which were often designed to carry only air-to-air missiles. This armament gives it a distinct advantage in the close-in, turning dogfights that characterize the skies over Vietnam. The Crusader is a marvel of 1950s engineering, a thoroughbred built for speed and maneuverability. It is powered by a single Pratt & Whitney J57 afterburning turbojet, capable of pushing the aircraft past Mach 17 in level flight. Its most distinctive feature is a variable incidence wing, a mechanism that allows the entire wing to pivot upwards by 7 degrees during takeoff and landing. This innovation provides a higher angle of attack and increased lift for slow-speed carrier operations, while allowing the fuselage to remain relatively level for good pilot visibility. However, this complexity is also a vulnerability. The entire system is reliant on hydraulic power. The F-8 is a notoriously difficult aircraft to fly, demanding constant attention from the pilot. Its handling characteristics are sharp, and it has a reputation for being unforgiving, particularly during carrier landings, which pilots refer to as controlled crashes. The operational tempo on Yankee Station is brutal. A carrier air wing is a self-contained ecosystem of combat, maintenance, and relentless pressure. Pilots fly missions around the clock. Sortie rates are high. The demand for air cover, strike escort, and reconnaissance is insatiable. Every launch is a risk, every recovery a test of skill. By mid-1967, the lessons of air combat over Vietnam have been hard-won. The initial over-reliance on missile technology has given way to a renewed appreciation for classic dogfighting skills and cannon armament. F-8 pilots are the masters of this domain. They are tasked with protecting the carrier battle group and escorting the heavily laden A-4 Skyhawk and A-6 Intruder attack jets on their perilous journeys inland. Loss rates are a constant and grim reality. Aircraft are lost to SAMs, AAA, and MiGs. They are also lost to operational accidents, the unforgiving consequence of operating high-performance jets from a moving airfield at sea. The maintenance crews on the carriers work miracles, patching up battle-damaged aircraft and keeping the machines flying. But the supply of spare parts is a constant challenge. The humid, salt-laden air of the Gulf of Tonkin is corrosive to complex machinery. Every flight pushes the aircraft closer to its mechanical limits. The strategic context of Lieutenant Pescarello's mission on June 7th is this environment of sustained, high-intensity combat. His role is defensive, to patrol the outer screen of the carrier's defenses, to be the first line of engagement against any potential aerial threat. But in the skies over the Gulf of Tonkin, the line between routine patrol and life-threatening emergency is invisibly thin. A simple mechanical failure, a leaking seal, or a fractured line can be as deadly as an enemy missile. The survival of the pilot and his aircraft depends not on firepower, but on a deep, procedural understanding of the machine and the cold, hard mathematics of altitude, airspeed, and distance. First Lieutenant Mario "Ski" Pescarello was a product of the rigorous and demanding pipeline of United States Marine Corps aviation. He was not a reckless hotshot, but a quiet, competent professional. Like all naval aviators of his era, his training was a progressive and unrelenting filter designed to weed out those who lacked the precise combination of intellect, motor skills, and composure required to operate high-performance aircraft in the world's most demanding environment. His journey began with Officer Candidate School, followed by primary flight training in the piston-engine T-34 Mentor, where he would have learned the fundamentals of aviation, climbs, turns, descents, and the discipline of checklists. He then progressed to the T-28 Trojan for more advanced maneuvers and an introduction to the power and complexity of a radial engine. The next step was the jet pipeline, likely in the T-2 Buckeye, where the speeds and altitudes increased dramatically. Here, he would have been introduced to instrument flying, formation flying, and the foundational skills of a jet pilot. Finally, he would have transitioned to an advanced trainer, like the F-9 Cougar or the F-11 Tiger, to earn his wings and qualify for his chosen fleet aircraft. It was here that he would have honed the skills of air-to-air combat, gunnery, and the high-stakes art of carrier qualification. Carrier qualification, or CARQUALS, is the crucible that forges a naval aviator. Making one's first arrested landing on the deck of an aircraft carrier is an experience that pilots never forget. It requires a level of precision and nerve that is difficult to comprehend. The pilot must fly the aircraft at the edge of its performance envelope, maintaining a precise airspeed and a specific angle of attack, aligning with a moving landing area that is often pitching and rolling in the sea. The final approach is a falling leaf descent, controlled not by flaring the aircraft, but by adjusting power to maintain the proper glide slope, as guided by the landing signal officer, or LSO, on the deck. The touchdown and immediate application of full power in case of a missed wire, the violent deceleration of the arrested landing. It is a sequence of intense, coordinated actions that must be performed perfectly every time. Pescarello had successfully navigated this entire process. He had demonstrated the skill and the temperament to be entrusted with a frontline fighter. He was assigned to a Marine Fighter Attack Squadron, VMFA, flying the F-8 Crusader. Marine squadrons, while land-based, frequently deployed aboard Navy carriers to augment the air wings. This was a testament to the seamless integration of Navy and Marine air power. By June of 1967, Pescarello was not a novice. He had accumulated a respectable number of flight hours in the Crusader. He knew its systems, its quirks, its personality. He had flown combat missions, looked at the green rolling hills of Vietnam from his cockpit, and understood the risks. He had seen the muzzle flashes of anti-aircraft guns, the flying telephone poles of SAMs. His training had prepared him for enemy action. It had also prepared him for mechanical failure. In flight school and in the fleet, pilots spend countless hours in simulators and in the air practicing emergency procedures. They drill on engine fires, generator failures, control malfunctions, and hydraulic emergencies. They memorize checklists and boldface, immediate action items. The goal is to make the response to an emergency as automatic and procedural as possible, to bypass the initial shock and adrenaline spike and allow training to take over. The mantra is aviate, navigate, communicate. Fly the airplane first, then figure out where you are and where you're going. Then tell someone what's happening. Pescarello was known as a calm and methodical pilot. He was not prone to panic. His instructors would have noted his steady hands, his ability to think through a problem, to compartmentalize and prioritize. These were the qualities that made a good fighter pilot. Not aggression, not ego, but a deep well of procedural competence and a cool head under pressure. On the morning of June 7th, as he walked across the flight deck of the USS Bon Homme Richard, the air thick with the smell of jet fuel and salt spray, he was just another pilot heading out to do his job. The pre-flight inspection would have been routine, a tactile conversation with his aircraft, checking control surfaces, tires, and looking for any signs of leaks or damage. The mission briefing would have been straightforward: a 2-hour combat air patrol sector, call signs, radio frequencies, tanker tracks, divert fields. He strapped into the cockpit, a space he knew better than his own home, and began the familiar litany of the pre-start checklist. The launch was a violent but controlled affair, a catapult shot that accelerated the Crusader from 0 to 150 knots in just over 2 seconds. As he climbed into the clear sky over the Gulf of Tonkin, joining up with his wingman, it was just another day at the office. The mission began as hundreds had before. Lieutenant Pescarello and his wingman climbed to their assigned altitude of 27,000 feet, established their patrol pattern, and settled in for 2 hours of scanning the horizon. The F-8's cockpit is a snug fit, a workspace of gauges, switches, and screens. The pilot is constantly monitoring his systems: engine RPM, exhaust gas temperature, fuel flow, hydraulic pressure, cabin altitude. The fuel state is particularly critical. In the parlance of naval aviation, fuel is life. Every decision is weighed against the fuel gauge. The combat air patrol was uneventful. The radios remained quiet, save for the routine chatter of the carrier's air controllers. The sky was empty of threats. With their patrol time nearing its end, Pescarello and his wingman began their transit back toward the carrier. It was during this return leg that the first sign of trouble appeared: a flicker of red on the master caution panel. Pescarello's eyes would have been drawn to it instantly. His training would have kicked in. His gaze would have scanned the annunciator panel to identify the specific fault. The light that stayed on was labeled HYD press, hydraulic pressure. A pilot's blood runs cold at the sight of that light. In the F-8 Crusader, the hydraulic system is the muscle that moves the flight controls. It operates on 2 independent systems, PC-1 and PC-2, for power control. A third, smaller utility system powers the landing gear, the flaps, the variable incidence wing, and the speed brake. The warning light indicated that one of the main power control systems was losing pressure. Pescarello would have immediately executed the boldface procedure for hydraulic failure. The first step is to try to isolate the failed system. He would have flipped a switch to secure the affected PC system, hoping to stop the leak and preserve the fluid in the remaining system. But it was too late. Within seconds, the second hydraulic warning light illuminated. PC-2 was now failing as well. This was a catastrophic failure, a dual power control hydraulic failure. He was now losing the very ability to steer the aircraft. The control stick in his hand, which was normally electronically connected to hydraulic actuators, would begin to feel sluggish, then unresponsive. He had maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes at most, before all hydraulic fluid would be gone, pumped overboard through whatever breach had occurred in the lines. He immediately communicated the emergency. Mayday, 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 mayday. Canasta 412 has a dual hydraulic failure. The calm, procedural voice of his wingman would have responded, "Roger, Canasta 412. I'm on your wing." His wingman moved in close, a second set of eyes to visually inspect the aircraft for signs of leaks or damage. He would have reported seeing a fine mist of hydraulic fluid venting from the belly of Pescarello's Crusader. Pescarello was now in a race against time. He knew that once the hydraulic pressure reached zero, the control surfaces would freeze. He needed to get the aircraft pointed in the right direction, trimmed for stable flight, and hope it would stay that way. He shoved the nose down, trading altitude for airspeed, desperate to get closer to the carrier. The USS Bon-Homme Richard was still over 100 miles away. He had no chance of making it. His only hope was to get into a position where he could safely eject. The carrier's controllers, hearing the Mayday call, would have immediately scrambled a rescue helicopter and diverted other aircraft to the scene. The calm, professional voices on the radio would have been a lifeline, providing vectors, updates, and a sense of order in the midst of chaos. As the hydraulic pressure gauges wound down towards zero, Pescarello felt the last vestiges of control slipping away. The stick became stiff and useless. The aircraft, however, was in a relatively stable, shallow descent. He was now a passenger. His training told him the next step was to eject. The procedure was to get the aircraft slowed down, pointed away from any friendly ships, and get out. But something made him hesitate. The F-8 had a backup system, a last-ditch mechanical linkage that was supposed to provide a rudimentary level of control in the event of a total hydraulic failure. It was a purely mechanical system of cables and pulleys with no hydraulic boost. It was designed to be used only for straight and level flight, to give the pilot a few extra moments to get to a safe ejection area. No one had ever tried to land a Crusader with it. The system was considered so ineffective, so difficult to use, that the standard procedure was to ignore it and eject. But Pescarello was a Marine, and he was not ready to give up his airplane. He made a decision. He was going to try to fly it. He reached down and engaged the mechanical linkage. The effect was immediate and alarming. The control stick now felt like it was set in concrete. It took all of his strength to make even the slightest input. The response from the aircraft was sluggish and delayed. It was like trying to steer a battleship with a canoe paddle. But it was control. Barely. He informed the carrier of his intentions. The response from the air boss in the tower would have been one of stunned silence, followed by a recommendation to eject. The book said it was impossible. But the decision ultimately rested with the pilot. Pescarello began the long, agonizing process of trying to nurse his crippled fighter back toward the carrier. He was losing altitude steadily. He couldn't risk using the afterburner to gain speed or altitude, as the change in trim might be too much for him to handle with the mechanical linkage. He was fighting the aircraft every second, his muscles straining against the immense aerodynamic forces on the control surfaces. His wingman stayed with him, calling out his altitude, airspeed, and offering words of encouragement. The carrier, meanwhile, was turning into the wind and preparing for an emergency recovery. They cleared the deck. They moved rescue crews into position. The LSO, the landing signal officer, who had seen everything, prepared to talk down a ghost. The odds of success were infinitesimally small. The F-8 was difficult enough to land with all systems functioning. Without hydraulics, without flaps, without a variable incidence wing, with only the brute force of the pilot's muscles to control it, A successful landing seemed beyond the realm of possibility. The approach would have to be flown at a dangerously high speed. Without flaps to increase lift, the stall speed of the Crusader was much higher. He would have to touch down on the deck at over 160 knots, nearly 20 knots faster than normal. The arrestor hook had to catch one of 4 steel cables. If he missed, there would be no time for a go-around. The aircraft would simply careen into the barricade or off the end of the angled deck and into the sea. As the carrier loomed larger in his windscreen, Pescarello focused on the task. He ignored the aching in his arms and shoulders. He focused on the meatball, the visual landing aid on the side of the deck, and the calm voice of the LSO in his headset. "You're looking good, Ski. Bring it on down. Bring it on, Dean." Bower. Power. W8. He was fighting to keep the wings level, to line up with the narrow strip of the landing area. The final few seconds were a blur of intense concentration. The aircraft slammed onto the deck, a jarring impact far harder than a normal landing. There was the shriek of tires and the incredible, violent deceleration as the tailhook snagged the number 3 wire. The Crusader lurched to a halt. For a moment, there was silence. Then the flight deck erupted. Fire crews swarmed the aircraft. The canopy opened, and Mario Pescarello, exhausted but safe, climbed out of the cockpit. He had done the impossible. The immediate aftermath was a scene of controlled pandemonium on the flight deck of the Bonhomme Richard. As Lieutenant Pescarello shut down the still-running J-57 engine, the deck crews who had witnessed the landing were in a state of disbelief. They had seen a ghost brought back to life. The plane captain and the yellow shirts, the aircraft directors, guided the Crusader out of the landing area and into its parking spot. The aircraft itself was a testament to the violence of the landing. The tires were shredded from the high-speed touchdown. The landing gear struts were compressed, and maintenance crews would later find that the force of the impact had bent the main gear. The tail hook assembly was severely strained. But the aircraft was in one piece. It was salvageable. Medics met Pescarello as he climbed down the ladder, but he waved them off. He was physically exhausted, his arms and back screaming from the strain of fighting the controls, but he was uninjured. He was immediately taken to the squadron-ready room for a debriefing. The debriefing would have been an intense affair. The squadron commander, the carrier's air boss, and intelligence officers would have been present. Pescarello would have recounted every detail of the flight, from the first flicker of the warning light to the final, jarring touchdown. He would have described the feel of the mechanical linkage, the control inputs required, the airspeeds he maintained. Every piece of information was vital. This was a scenario that had, until that day, been purely theoretical. Pescarello's experience was now the primary data point. The mission report he filed would become required reading. It would be analyzed, dissected, and incorporated into the training syllabus. The maintenance crews, meanwhile, began their own investigation. They swarmed over Buno 145546, their task to perform a forensic analysis of the failure. They traced the hydraulic lines, looking for the source of the leak. They would eventually find a small but critical failure in a hydraulic line, a rupture that allowed the lifeblood of the aircraft's control systems to be pumped overboard in less than 2 minutes. The aircraft was deemed repairable, a testament to the ruggedness of its design and the skill of the carrier's maintenance department. It would take time and a significant number of replacement parts, but the Crusader would fly again. For Pescarello, the event was a mixture of relief and professional validation. In the culture of naval aviation, bringing back a damaged aircraft is a mark of exceptional skill and airmanship. While the book said to eject, his decision to stay with the aircraft and attempt a landing, a decision based on a deep understanding of his machine and a refusal to give up, was vindicated. He would not receive a medal for this specific act in the context of the Vietnam War, with acts of valor happening daily. A successful emergency landing was often considered simply part of the job. But he earned something else, the profound and lasting respect of his fellow pilots, the LSOs, and the deck crews. He had faced a no-win scenario and had, through sheer force of will and procedural competence, created a third option. The verification of the event was immediate and irrefutable. It had been witnessed by his wingman, by the radar operators tracking his flight, by the LSOs, and by hundreds of sailors on the carrier deck. The physical evidence was there in the bent landing gear and the ruptured hydraulic line. The after-action reports from the squadron and the carrier's air wing would document the event in painstaking technical detail. This was not a story or a legend. It was a recorded, verified fact of naval aviation history. A Vought F-8 Crusader had been successfully landed aboard a carrier with a total failure of its primary flight control hydraulic systems. Something that was supposed to be impossible was not. The long-term impact of Lieutenant Pescarello's feat was felt primarily in the realm of training and procedure. His successful landing forced a re-evaluation of the emergency procedures for a dual hydraulic failure in the F-8. Prior to this event, the procedure was simple and unequivocal: eject. The backup mechanical linkage was considered a marginal system at best, intended only to allow the pilot to orient the aircraft for a safe ejection. Pescarello had proven that, in the hands of a skilled and determined pilot, the system could be used to save the aircraft. The flight data and Pescarello's debrief were sent back to the Naval Air Systems Command and to Vought, the aircraft's manufacturer. Engineers and test pilots analyzed the data. The information was then incorporated into the F-8 NATOPS manual, the Bible for every naval aviator flying the Crusader. The emergency procedure was amended, while ejection remained the recommended course of action. The updated procedure now included the option for an attempted landing with detailed instructions on the airspeed's configuration and control techniques that Pescarello had pioneered in the skies over the Gulf of Tonkin. This change, born from one pilot's refusal to quit, would have a lasting legacy. Over the remaining service life of the F-8, and potentially in other aircraft with similar backup systems, other pilots would face similar emergencies. The knowledge that a landing was possible, that it had been done before, provided a new layer of hope and a new course of action in a desperate situation. It is impossible to know for certain how many other aircraft and crews were saved because of the precedent set on June 7, 1967. But in the high-stakes world of carrier aviation, even one saved aircraft is a significant return on investment. The cost of a single F-8 Crusader was over $1 million. The cost of training a naval aviator was even greater. Pescarello had saved both. The event also reinforced a core tenet of naval aviation culture: a deep, almost intimate knowledge of one's aircraft is paramount. Pilots are taught not just to fly their machines, but to understand them, to know their systems, their limits, and their failure modes. Pescarello's actions were not a reckless gamble, but a calculated risk based on his confidence in his own abilities and his understanding of the residual control authority provided by the mechanical backup. His story became part of the unofficial lore of the F-8 community, a tale told in ready rooms and officers' clubs, a benchmark for airmanship. It served as a powerful teaching tool, a real-world example of how procedural knowledge, combined with courage and physical strength, could overcome a catastrophic mechanical failure. The broader strategic consequences of this single event were negligible. The war in Vietnam would continue its brutal course, but the tactical lessons were invaluable. It was a reminder that in the complex interplay between man and machine, the human element, the pilot's judgment, skill, and determination remained the most critical component. In the archives of naval aviation, the incident is recorded in dry, technical language in the after-action reports of VFMA 531 and the USS Bon-Homme Richard. Buno 145546 was repaired and returned to service. Lieutenant Pescarello continued to fly combat missions. But for those who witnessed it, and for those who later learned of it, the story was a powerful testament to the quiet professionalism that is the hallmark of the naval aviator. The sky over the Gulf of Tonkin is still there. The deep blue water is unchanged. The war is a memory, a collection of records in an archive, stories passed down. The USS Bonhomme Richard has been decommissioned and scrapped, its steel recycled into new forms. The F-8 Crusader, the last of the gunfighters, has long been retired from service, replaced by newer, more complex machines. What remains is the data, the hard numbers: altitude, airspeed, fuel state, hydraulic pressure. The mathematics of flight do not change. The physics of a high-speed landing on a pitching deck are as unforgiving today as they were in 1967. What also remains is the human element. The story of Ski Pescarello is not one of heroism in the classic sense. He did not shoot down 5 enemy aircraft. He did not single-handedly win a battle. His was a quieter, more technical kind of courage. It was the courage to trust his training, to believe in his own skill, and to refuse to accept the accepted limits of his machine. It was a victory, not over an enemy, but over a mechanical failure, over the laws of aerodynamics that sought to pull his aircraft from the sky. In the end, survival in aviation is often a matter of inches, of seconds, of pounds per square inch. It is a game of procedure and luck. On that day in June, Mario Pescarello had a full measure of both. He would continue his career in the Marine Corps, eventually retiring as a lieutenant colonel. His remarkable feat of airmanship became a footnote in the grand, violent history of the Vietnam War, a small but perfect example of grace under pressure. The final image is not of combat, but of control, of a single pilot alone in his cockpit, wrestling a crippled machine back from the brink, using nothing more than his own strength and an unshakable understanding of the unforgiving science of flight. I hope you enjoyed this look into a remarkable piece of aviation history. If you found this story as compelling as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the world of military aviation. And in the comments below, let us know where in the world you're watching from. It's always great to see how far these stories travel. Thank you for watching.